萨拉主题系列讲座 All you need to know about home inspection。
我觉得差不多了，我们开始吧，好不好？
OK， 好，
那我们开始吧。 OK， 好，大家好啊，我是SALA HOMES 的 Lisa。今天可能有很多朋友都是刚刚认识我们，可能对 SALA 还不太了解，第一次来听我们的这个讲座，所以我先用大概1-2分钟的时间简单介绍一下我们 SALA 好不好？那 SALA 呢是2019年成立于硅谷，专注于房地产买卖、投资和开发的。目前我们业务是遍及加州湾区每一个城市，南加的这个大洛杉矶地区以及德州和 Arizona 这些地方。我们致力呢，从客户的这个房地产切实需求出发，从自住需求、家庭财富增长各方面入手，提供端对端的这个专业服务，尽我们最大的努力帮助客户实现财富的积累和增长，实现对未来美好生活的预期和对财富自由的这个畅想。那在过去的1年里呢，SALA 的团队依靠在各自专业领域的经验，通过广阔的房源网络、强大的这个市场数据分析模型、投资和税务规划经验以及很强的议价能力，我们已经帮大概有150个家庭和个人实现了安居乐业和财富的增长。那我们的宗旨呢是帮助每个客户 buy potential, sell beautiful。所以作为快速发展的这个初创公司，SALA 2年内我们的资本总量增长有150%，资产规模已经达到了100个 million， 员工呢也从最初的5个人增长到现在的近40人。SALA 的这个快速发展呢，离不开大家对我们的支持。作为对这个客户的回报呢，我们也希望把我们的行业经验和知识分享给大家。这也是我们一直在做一系列讲座的这个初衷。好，那这个大概就是一个简短的对 SALA 的一个介绍。接下来呢，就是回归到我们今天的这个主题。我们今天的这个主题呢是关于 home inspection， 就是 all you need to know about home inspection。那 SALA 呢，在过去的大概1年之内呢，我们有接近150个 transaction， 其中呢有接近70个是 listing， 就是帮 seller 去卖房子。那大家知道，就是无论是对于 buyer 还是对于 seller 来讲 ，home inspection 都是非常非常的重要。那在 SALA 过去这接近70个 listing 里面，我们有很多，我们基本上有超过50%的这个inspection 都是由 Barry 来帮我们做的，所以他是一位非常非常有经验，从业了大概有22年，然后他所检查的房子有超过2万个这样的一个非常有经验的一个 inspector。 Okay, so now let's welcome Barry to give us this presentation about what you need to do about home inspection. So let's welcome Barry. Okay.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing tonight? Hope you're all doing well. We have a lot of stuff to cover, but I wanted to put one more thing in here, if you don't mind, is what a home inspection is. Not everybody realizes, and just a quick spot on that is a home inspection is a visual inspection based at the time the inspector is there. So a lot of these things we'll talk about, you'll see why it's important to be prepared, even to have areas cleaned out or accessible for your inspector. As you see here, we're going to be looking at foundation cracks, talking about retaining walls and decks with improper supports, bad framing for interior homes, interior wall settlement cracks, siding damage, and other issues we'll be talking about through the next hour or so. As far as the foundation cracks on the next screen, if that's okay, you'll see three pictures here. The first one is a real common moderate crack that happens for many homes, depending on your area, and it can happen with moisture around your house, just on how it drains, or it can happen with, even an earthquake. And sometimes, as in picture number 2, you can have the rebar that's put in the concrete improperly placed. And over time, as the water washes on it, the rebar will expand and cause these cracks. Those cracks are usually horizontal cracks. And the horizontal cracks are the ones most people are more, shall we say, nervous about because they cover a greater distance. And the more distance you cover, obviously, the more damage and replacement costs are going to be affected by this. And the drainage, when it drains away from the home, doesn't sit on the concrete as much. And when it does not sit on the concrete as much, it allows for the water to go away. If it sits on the concrete will absorb that water over a period of time. And then, of course, it adds or aids to the damage of the foundation. There's other factors that go into play here. Trees can also cause some damage. So when people plant trees, I like to ask them to research what trees they're doing so the roots don't put pressure up on your foundation. As the roots grow, just like they can lift a sidewalk, they can damage your house. That leads to a lot of problems and big expenses. It's really unnecessary with a little bit of planning. And then the last picture over here on the right, number 3, you'll also see there's been some surface deterioration, but it's a little bit deeper, and you'll see some rocks popping. That tends to be where the water is sat there too long, and it's caused more damage by basically washing off the sand on the edge of the concrete. Yep, perfect, thank you. The next crack on the left, you'll see it's sort of white in color. It's a concrete block system, and these kind of cracks, they usually have concrete inside them. So on that type of foundation, it seems like there's going to be more of a damage issue from an outside issue, like the trees we were talking about, or being this is in a garage. Sometimes people have done work in there, put too much weight, and it causes damage to them. The middle picture is a unique picture. I was talking about the horizontal cracks before, and those horizontal cracks, if you look between the wood in what looks to be sort of pinkish area, there's that horizontal crack. It was very hard to find on this particular house. There was a deck up against it, and somebody conveniently left some wood there. We moved it back, and we were able to find that. But again, we can only talk about what we can see. So it's a little hard. Maybe take an extra second and look down there along the wood in the pinkish area, and you'll see that crack. The last crack on this one here, number 3, that's starting to get larger. And with the soil movements, the tree pressures, or the water, you'll see that this happens. And that's when you start to see especially more settlement on your homes, where you're seeing other damages, doors that don't open right, windows that don't open right, sometimes cracking. We'll talk about the cracking in interior later on. But this crack here, that's going to need some repair, just like the horizontal crack, because the width is more. It tends to be where they have to come in and sometimes replace this concrete. And this concrete work, as of about 2 years ago, I had somebody tell me they were charging around $1,000 to start to repair it per foot. So if you have a small area, it's not a lot, but if you get 10 feet or 100 feet, you can see how the price would jump up, immensely. And that's based on a few years ago, not current numbers, of course. The next slide here we'll be talking about is the retaining walls. This one is rather interesting. There's a little backstory I want to share with you. This house was completely remodeled, and everybody was talking how well it was done. However, it was on a big hillside, and they put this retaining wall up. And a quick glance at all of them, you see number 2 and 3, the posts are not properly supported. The brackets are not there, which I'll go over each picture individually. But the first one was one that I had not seen in 23 years of doing this. If you look closely at picture number 1, you're going to see that the board that is running at an angle is on the edge of another board. So it literally has like 5-10% coverage. And then they only put 2 little nails in there to hold it. There's no strength. There's no support. This was not done properly. They were telling everybody it was. The fact that the board is not offering any strength and that they had to add that board tells you they're worried about movements. At that point, as a home inspector, we can only go so far. We would definitely recommend you have a contractor come in, or in this case, possibly an engineer, because you're dealing with soils, soil retention, soil runoff, and of course the retaining wall and all its strong supports it's supposed to be providing, not only for maybe the structure, but a walkway or any other area behind that retaining wall. Picture number 2, pretty self-explanatory. You really think that it's going to hold up? It's moved. If somebody put a brick there, they didn't take care of it. Nobody checked this. The deck above had some movement, and I didn't know why till I got down below. And this is what I found. On picture number 3, this one was also interesting. It had same decks, had some movements. It's the older portion of the deck, but they used a funny little piece of metal you can see in there between the 2 pieces of board, and they put a couple of screws. And this is what I want everybody to understand. Screws are not rated as a structural support. Screws, when you put pressure on them sideways, will snap. Nails will hold better and bend. Your bolts will hold stronger, and actually probably the strongest type of nail, screw, or bolt, the bolt's going to be your best option. And this little piece of metal isn't really going to offer a lot of support. It's just not going to hold up to any standard. It's going to last you guys over time. So it's always good to have your licensed contractors do the work, so they're going to have some liability, not a handyman on this kind of stuff. This is real critical and really, really important for supports, especially with hillsides and soils. This can even affect the house foundation if the soils were to shift. Number 3 would be the interior wall framing. Next slide.
Lily, next slide. 下一页。
Thank you. So actually, this is just showing you, I'm sorry, it's on the deck support here. You'll see the nails I was talking about, how it's barely covering that connection. And those nails, I mean, that's all that's holding. There's a couple of nails in the very edge of that board. And it's just not, the strength is not there. There's no real offer of anything here. This is basically a useless piece of wood. It's not doing its job. And you can see the other wood, and this wood is all new. And the next picture is the same connection, just a different angle. So you can see how it sits on that corner, and that's where the concern was. And I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, so here's our interior house. This picture has so many things going on with it that I want you guys to take a look. And since we can't see each other where I'm pointing, I'm going to use colors. You'll see towards the ceiling, it's open. There's exposed wood, and you have a couple of posts that are put in that are white in color, and one to the right side, which is brown. The thing that you can't see as much on this picture, that upper portion that's all brown, they cut the header. So this is the main board offering the main support across the span of the front of the house. And somebody went in there and cut it off and put these little teeny 2x4s, 4x4s in there. And this house has a strong chance for the house to settle over a little bit of time. And this was done before the last rainstorm we had in this area. So there could even be more damage on it right now if they haven't repaired it. The beams themselves, the headers, they're expensive. They're hard to get. They have to be either engineered properly or a solid piece of wood that goes across the entire span that's properly supported, connected, and held together. The homeowner buying this, selling this, had passed away on this particular home. The family just came in and found the house like this, and they're selling it as is. And the buyers, when I was working with them on this particular deal, didn't even understand what this was looking at. And, there's probably just in this area, at least $50,000 worth of work by the time you pay your labor and your expenses. And there's a lot to be said with that. The white ceiling that you see above the framing, if you look at it closely, you'll see there's a textured popcorn material. Now, I don't know where everybody's at, but I'm going to speak basically what the rules are here in California. Whenever there's that textured ceiling, there's a chance that sometimes it's called popcorn ceiling. There are times that it's called texture, but either way, there is a chance that asbestos is in that product. Asbestos is not good for us to breathe. And in 1978, they were required by California law to not make any more products with asbestos. However, what most people don't know, and this is one that a lot of people miss, they were actually allowed to use any product manufactured with asbestos up until 1983. So that means if your house is built in 83, it could have asbestos. The thing with a home inspection, it's really important to know, is there is no way to visually identify if it is or is not asbestos. You'd have to have it tested to know for sure. There's just no other way around it because humans cannot identify it. It has to be lab tested. Also, you're going to see here with this framing and stuff on the left side is where the front door was. They're also missing more of the header on that side. They had some wood torn out. It's just a lot of work here. And this has a lot of areas where there's just not support, and the floors were soft in the area from the weight. So it's really hard to, obviously this is a great picture for a seminar, but this is not always the case. And it's really hard to know all the signs, and having a home inspection is going to be something that's going to at least hopefully get you some clues that there's something going on to discovering the whole situation, depending on how much of the issue is exposed. The next, yes, thank you. These are the settlement cracks I spoke of earlier. Now, please pay attention to this part. These cracks are not running straight. They are running off at different angles, and these are areas where there is sheetrock, not plaster. The older plaster homes, the cracks go everywhere. But when there's sheetrock, you can get cosmetic cracking, and the cosmetic cracking would be like between two pieces of drywall or sheetrock at the seams that have a little tape and texture, and the house is swelled up because it's rained or contracted when it's dry, and you get a little bit of wood frame movement. Those cosmetic cracks, pretty common. When you start to see settlement cracks like in all these pictures, it's a tell that you want to at least check the door, make sure it's closing right. Start checking the windows in the area, find out what's going on with the foundation, have someone look in your attic at the framing, because sometimes the framing above is twisting, or you have a foundation issue, or sometimes in some areas, and I'm going to use San Jose real fast as an example, there's different pocketed areas where they use jacks underneath the home, and these jacks work independently from the foundation to help hold the house, because the homes will move based on the moisture and the soil below in the crawl space. So if the jacks are set a little high and the foundation settles a little bit, since they're independent, you can get these cracks also. Settlement cracks don't always mean terrible things. Sometimes it's, hey, you adjust these jacks, or you got a bad board that started to twist after it dried out years ago. You can do some small repairs. It's not always the gigantic problem, but they're definitely something you want to pay attention to. Have your area looked at, find out what's going on, and try to minimize it. Again, this can also be caused by moisture, because if you don't have proper drainage around your house and the water builds up in an area, you have an opportunity for the soils to become wet or saturated more. So we all know when we walk around the place, anywhere, and we step in the mud, how we can sink a little bit. Well, houses will move the same way if it gets too wet or too saturated. So those settlement cracks here, based on if I had some big cracks in the foundation like we saw earlier in one of the last pictures for the foundation, you'd be looking to have a contractor come in, or potentially an engineer, depending on the situation. Okay, here's some more settlement crack pictures. Now these, you can see the bulging. That's a little more of an indication of some settlement going on, but they're a different design. You'll see the tapes pulling off, or the bulge on the left picture there. That's from pressure. So what I try to find when I do these things is look at them and see what's going on. Is it the foundation issue, so I can get you the right person out there, and try to minimize some of your problems, so you will get the right people to figure out how and what you need to do to correct the situation. These are not uncommon. Unfortunately, they're a problem with any area where you have a lot of water, moisture, and soil movement, but these are definitely areas where you need to be aware of. The middle one can also sometimes be water damage, but if you notice, that picture does not have any stains directly around it. So it's going to lead more to the settlement from pressure and movements. The last picture on this, the last picture, you'll actually see the cracks. It's up against the wall. So if you take the actual seam against the wall and you don't have a crack there, but you go out a little ways, that's another tell that, hey, there's something going, something moving, something happening. We want to investigate further and find out why, so you can address the situation. Most of your settlement cracks, a lot of settlement cracks and the foundation and interior has a lot to do with water. Water is actually one of the biggest problems with houses. Termites are an issue too, but water is a big problem. And the more you control the water and you spend a little bit of money on that, hopefully you don't spend the big monies on repairs. And that's what also a good home inspector will be able to help you find out and determine if you need to take something further, even on controlling the water. Next slide. Thank you. Now here's the water damage to some siding. The reason I wanted to use this picture was if you look at the board, it's going across the top of the window and then down the side of the window. Where they come together, you'll actually see they almost look spongy or soft or ripply. Those kind of issues are almost a tell. You don't even have to touch them and they're going to have damage. You can go up with your finger a lot of times on these and just push on a little bit and they'll start to sink in. But ultimately, if you're curious about whether your siding has damage, whether it be water or termite, it's an easy thing to do. If you can take a small screwdriver and just use your wrist and just tap it. You don't need to be strong. You just need to tap it. If it goes in, it's a form of damage. Now you just have to determine what kind of damage. Real common areas will be at door jambs down at the bottom, like on the side of a garage, around window trim like this. But one most people don't think about is when it's down at the base of the siding, say the bottom 6 inches or so, because of sprinklers. You always want to keep your sprinkler spraying away from your home so you don't have that water source hitting it all the time. Because, excuse me, the water, once it penetrates inside, if there's not a strong moisture barrier, you're talking big dollars in damage. Let's see, we have the next slide, please. This one was a big one, and not too many people understand this one, but please take a minute, look at this plumbing system. You're going to see we have a drain line. This is under a bathroom, and you'll see the white line, which is a PVC pipe going in. First of all, PVC pipe underneath the house is not okay if it's a water supply line. The water supply lines have pressurized water going through them, and these pipes don't hold the pressure long term. And if they leak inside the building, the opportunity for any form of water damage can occur. The next thing with that PVC pipe going down into the drain system here, on this particular house, this was going to a water treatment system, which means it was going into the drinking water. So any of the fumes coming out of this gas pipe, which is methane gas from the waste or drain lines, can go up this pipe, back into the water treatment, into the water you're either taking a shower or taking a drink from. So another reason why home inspections can help you out a lot is we catch things like this, and you're not drinking basically nasty water or taking a bath with nasty water. You're not having the methane gas potentially leak into a spot where it builds up, and methane gas can be explosive. So with the right spark, say from your water heater, a furnace, even the barbecue outside, because this particular system was outside, there's too much of a buildup. It's an opportunity for, unfortunately, something like a fire or an explosion, and that's not good. Another thing this picture shows, on the pipes, you look at most of the drain pipes coming down, and you're going to see some rust. This is very, very normal in many homes that are 30, 40 years old and have a crawl space. Your drain pipes can have moisture from leaks, say 10 years ago, that got on there and it rusted the pipe a little bit, but they're still in good shape because these are cast iron or metal, and they're very thick and they don't really rust out that easily. But The other thing I want to look at when I'm seeing these things is what kind of rust, and does it look like it may be coming from the inside out, or any other indicators, because you can also obviously have the pipe rust from the inside or out. I'm hoping you guys can tell from left, the first pipe that comes down, there's also a little bit of moisture streaking on that, and that particular pipe had a little bit of a leak. It wasn't spraying out, but when we ran the shower above, there was water coming down, so they had a leak there, and that ended up turning into a shower pan and shower being torn out because of the damage that was found. So there's a lot in this little picture, which most people won't see, that after doing this for 23 years, I sort of, have a lot of time. I can catch things almost by looking at them. You want to look at how the pipe is supported. Even if there's wood scraps that were on the ground, you want to clean those up because they would attract termites, and the termites would eat the wood scraps, and then basically look up at the house above and consider that like a main course and go eat there. And then of course you get big damage. So having just the simple things of cleaning up wood scraps, construction debris, that can also save you a lot of money. And a lot of contractors and their crew, because you can have a wonderful contractor, and I'm not picking on anybody particular, but they get one bad employee or one lazy employee and he leaves trash down there, all of a sudden you have a problem a few years later. Excuse me, I have to take a drink. Thank you. Now, this next picture, just so you know, when we talked about the house earlier that had all the framing damage and the header was damaged, these pictures are from the same house. On the right, you're going to see all the blackness, and then you're going to see the wall come down a little bit to a post. That's actually one of the posts that was in the other picture. When I walked under there, I could tell we had a roof leak. The reason I use the word environmental issues is in California, you cannot say something is mold unless you have it tested, because there's so many molds and some people are affected by it and not. And the attorneys have a field day with it. So it has to be lab tested. One of the molds that a lot of us know about is called cheese. So, having mold in the house like black mold and Stachybotrys, you have to test to confirm that. The picture on the left was water damage with the mold, but the paint is peeling. And that's had to do with the outside walls having some damage and the water come through and leaking. And that leads to more damage there. And let's see. So if you have a lab test, most home inspectors won't do that because you really want to have the business set up on that. And the guys that do take a sample, it's not a bad thing, but I prefer to refer it off to a person that has got a biology degree and knows what they're talking about versus somebody just taking a quick test and sending it off to a lab. The next one will be the electrical issues. This is very common. So these are in the first two are inside electrical panels. You have the first one where the yellow wires coming through the wall. That wire will over time rub up on the blue part of the panel because it's not properly secured with what they call a wire clamp. And as that walls expand and contract, the wire rubs on the metal, it'll cut through the yellow insulation, and then you can have an arc or a short circuit, which leads to anything electrical from a failed circuit to an electrical fire, sometimes somebody getting shocked. So a simple clamp can make a big difference. Picture number 2, you'll see there's multiple wires going into that red cap. There's 3 to be exact. So they bring in 2 different circuits and they only use 1 wire to go to the breaker. You can only have 1 wire tied into each screw spot on those breakers. And they did this in a way to make the circuit work better, but that's going to overload the circuit because there's too much power from 2 circuits going where 1 should be. So double taps are things people don't know about that come up a lot in inspections. And the power coming through those lines can trip and kill the breaker or cause the wire to overheat. And when it overheats, you have bare wire, and there's your short or potential for any electrical or fire damage from that also. This third picture, you'll see by the wood, it's sort of in the bottom left corner. There's these little streaks coming up. There's some wires and stuff. That is common in the crawl space. They'll run the wire, say, from the left side to the right side of the crawl space, and nobody will tack it up. So if it's in the ground and myself, or even if you guys were to go in the crawl space and the ground's a little wet and you have an electrical source, there's a chance for shock or being electrocuted. The wires should always be brought up to the subfloor on top of this picture and secured properly, and not by anybody, because if they go up to put the wires on, they crush the wire when they staple them up. That will also lead you to damaged wires, which will then overload. So one thing I can't stress enough is contractors, yes, they cost more money, but they're supposed to do things to a good standard to make sure your home is safe, your investment is safe. So you have an opportunity to, to sleep at night. It's really what it comes down to, and be safe. It's not about somebody getting hurt, and sometimes saving $1 doesn't work. I really push the fact that contractors have a responsibility for everybody's safety. Was there one more slide? Or is that it? Let me see. There we go. Yes. So this is an older home on this left picture, and this is what's called knob and tube wiring. This was common back 30s, 40s, 50s. In the 60s, it started to phase out, and definitely gone by the 70s. This was the first type of wiring that they would use, similar to Romex of what we use today, but it had a cloth covering the wire, not the plastic like you see, say, in the picture on the far right. Knob and tube wiring, for its time and technology of time, is a good product. It has worn out or outlived its life expectancy, so it's always a good idea to upgrade that. The thing about knob and tube wiring is if you bump the cloth and you're crawling around, or you're in a basement where some of these homes still have this, you're walking around, you can actually get zapped. So it's definitely something that, like I said, is good for its age, but it has lived its life. It's time to improve. When you open an area, say you remodel a kitchen, you find some, or the bathroom, or the whole house, it's time to update the electrical whenever you find that. Picture number 2, there's a duct going across it. There is a wire coming off of it. It was loose up in there, and they had it going to a fan system. The problem is it was not properly connected at the fan itself, and that leads to it being outside of a junction box, which will tie into picture 3 in a minute. But just because something's put in and the fan's working doesn't mean it's properly installed. And when you have a wire cap only, and then you have insulation, or you have any other factor where it can get into the wiring, that leads to the possibility of a short, a failure to your fan, to any form of damage that electricity can cause. And that's something that gets very expensive over a lousy $5 part, $10 part. The blue box in picture number 3, that is a junction box. You will find that they use these for your outlets, your light switches, sometimes just to make the circuit better because they have to splice it off to another area. They'll use these boxes. They'll put the wire caps like you see on here. But this particular one here is missing the cover plate, which is the same thing you see on your outlets or switches, but it's solid, so that no fingers get in there, nothing else gets in there and causes you any kind of electrical shorts or damage. So it's all this little stuff adds up, and they can be big problems. And these are many, many issues that are found throughout the home, and even new homes, especially the electrical box here on the right. I find a lot of times in the attics and crawl spaces, they just don't cover them. Nobody checks them, and everybody leaves, and then the home inspector comes in and gets to give you the funny bad news. And it's a little upsetting the homeowners after they paid all that money to their contractor. Next slide. So I would be looking for any questions if you guys have any on this.
Thank you, Barry, for your presentation. If anyone has questions, we're open for questions right now.
About the roof. Okay. Yes. On a roof, there's a few factors. So There's different types of roofs, number one. So the most common in the Bay Area that I see are going to be asphalt shingle comp roofs, tile roofs, which can be ceramic, concrete, or they can be metal. The metal roofs, the one thing that's really unique about those is they can go over another roof, say a wood shake roof, and be put on properly. But then if somebody were to walk on them, they will bend like a soda can will, and they don't go back into shape. So one thing we find a lot is mom, dad put the roof on the house. The teenager wants to do something, sneak out of the house or whatever. They walk on the roof and they start bending up, and then the parents have leaks. When it comes to the concrete tile roofs, they're very nice roofs. They last a long time if they're properly cared for. They have to be installed with the proper felt below. But if you walk on them and you don't walk on them right, the issues will be cracked tiles. And one thing that most home inspectors, nobody talks about, that I always try to tell my clients is when you have these type of roofs, try to get some extra roof shingles to come with that, because if they stop making that model and you can't find them anywhere, you may have over 2 or 3 pieces of roofing. You may have to re-roof a house. But if you have 20 or 30 pieces laying on the side stacked off and they don't make that roof anymore, you have an opportunity to at least do a repair and not spend $20,000, $30,000 on a roof, versus a few $100s maybe to a few $1,000s. So that's one thing about the roofs. Another thing about a roof that is not talked about a lot that I love to bring up is if you've been in the Bay Area or somewhere else, we had a big storm, it's not a bad idea to have somebody come out and take a look at the roof every now and then, especially a roofer. It's not always the home inspector that does the job. But if you had a roofer come out, they can look for any damage from wind, from the sun fading on, say, a rubber gasket on some of the roofs and things like that, or even the mastic that they use to do a small patch job. And by having the roofs inspected, they'll tell you, hey, there's some debris over here, or this needs to be cleaned out, because even gutters backing up will allow the water to go up underneath the shingles and give you eave damage. So those kind of things are very normal, very standard, but it's something that's a maintenance item that most people do not do. And then the home inspector gets to come out, or the roof inspector, and tell you the bad news that the roof is damaged and it's going to cost you a lot of money. Let's see. Somebody said something about floods. I saw that come up. Unfortunately, that is not covered by a home inspector. That would be something I think the natural hazards handles and things like that. So we don't get heavily involved in that as far as the true floods go. But when it comes to Jennifer, I see your comment. I'll get to you in a second. The flooding, though, is something that I try to, at least if I see a river or a creek bed, I try to make mention that somebody can go ahead and investigate it further to get that information. On the cosmetic cracks, Jennifer, if you don't mind popping up one more question and just let me know, are you talking about the foundations, or what kind of cracks were you talking about? I'm going to assume the cosmetic cracks on the inside of a home foundation. Thank you. So on a foundation, it's not so much cosmetic as what I call hairline. When they're small, one thing I did not say earlier is you can get these small cracks. They're called also known as shrinkage cracks, because as concrete actually dries, when it's first poured, it will cure or shrink a little bit, and you'll get these hairline cracks. A good way to describe this over a meeting like this would say something around the thickness of 2 standard business cards or smaller, more like going to be cosmetic in most cases. If it gets a little bit thicker than that, it's a moderate crack. Somewhere around a 1/4 inch or so. These are all just eyeball measurements. You're going to see they tend to be more of an issue, and it'll depend if it's vertical or horizontal. Those cracks have different reasons for why they're there. And then, of course, what kind of foundation support you have. If you have them in your home now, and that's what you're asking about, excuse me, it's definitely something that you can look at and have evaluated. So if you guys have any more questions, I'm still here.
Thank you, Barry, for answering everyone's questions. We have a it looks like we have something that popped up on everyone's screen. It would be great if everyone can answer the questions about today's inspection report seminar. Are there any more questions? Barry, it looks like there's a new question in the chat.
Okay. Let me pull that up. I'm sorry, I don't see the chat comments. I don't want to hold you guys up. There it is. Okay. Okay. So when it comes to costs, it is technically in California illegal for someone to give you an estimate of cost for repair for 12 months from the date of inspection. Some guys do this. I don't think they know the rules. With our company, I push experience and integrity really hard. So I would not do that in any writing form, but I might be able to tell you, hey, I just did my bathroom and it cost me X, Y, Z, and those kind of things. But I don't give any hard numbers because every contractor is going to have a different price. Everybody's going to have this, but I try to give you at least an understanding of what I think the ballpark will be, but there's no quotes or anything like that. So there will be no true hard cost. It would just be a guesstimate, if you will. Yes, it is a bit higher. I don't know that hiring the home inspector that gives out the cost is better, in my opinion. I think that there's too many variables there that, and I'm going to sort of go into the COVID thing right now. Sometimes the plywood was $25. It's shot up to $100. I have some contractor friends and they don't even offer prices anymore until they actually get the job going. They just give you a ballpark because the costs are so high and change, weekly. Oh, okay. So I see that Tim has a comment here from how the home buyer's perspective, when we need to find an inspector, how to tell if the inspector is good. Are there any screening questions we can ask? Something that's really good on that is you want to find out the guy's experience, number one. It just helps to know what the background is. The next thing would be is if they're a part of an association. There are really, in California, 3 main associations. One, and the biggest one, is the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors, which I am a part of. There's also another association called the American Society of Home Inspectors. It's a smaller organization from what I understand. And then there's the CREA, which is the California body. I don't know what their acronym means, but it's California Home Inspectors, basically. The reason I would say to use the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors is I like their testing procedures. I think keeps us on our toes. They have a good support system in teaching us, but they're also about the consumer, not just the inspector. So I find that I think their quality is better. I've been with them for 15 some odd years. And before that, I was a member of Aabbee. And I left them when I went over to Internachi. I hope that answers your question. When it comes to what else you can ask them, what's their experience as far as how many have they done? Then check with, if you're working with a real estate agent, you can check with your agent. You can check with your friends. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I had this guy and he did a great job. Or, hey, this guy, it turned out to be a bad deal. And word of mouth is huge. So it's not a problem to ask around. I think it's smart to do that. And it looks like Carol asked a question earlier about where I'm located. I work out of the Bay Area, San Jose, San Francisco, through Hollister up into Sacramento. That's my general area.
Jeannie in the chat asked, will you recommend the homeowners to do a home inspection even though they are not selling the house?
There's definitely an advantage to have a home inspection because you can find out the condition of your home. It will help you with your maintenance and hopefully keeping things up and maybe catch some problems before they get big and cost you big money. So there's definitely that advantage. It depends on your construction knowledge, whether you want to do that a lot or you want to do it every, say, 5 years. There's definitely an advantage to that. And the cost, depending on the size of the home, is not a lot of money in the big picture of things versus if you have to do a bathroom remodel comparison.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer asked, some houses come to market without home inspection report. You take on why and what to do as a buyer.
Okay. So in the Bay Area, most people are doing their inspections on the seller side, but I still get some buyers I go out and do inspections with. Why I would have an inspection is you want to know what you're buying. You want to know the condition. And most of the times that will help out. The one thing is if you have a hoarding house, I had one of these today. That's why it's so fresh in my memory, where they have a lot of stuff and you can't see anything. You have to make a judgment call because I was able to find some damage, but I could not, for example, get to the water heater in this house today. And I can't offer an opinion because I can't move their personal property. So there are some limitations to it, but definitely, even when I buy and sell my own houses, I actually hire another inspector. I don't want to go in there with what I call seller's eyes or buyer's eyes. I want an independent, non-biased person to come in and take a look and just give me some information. Because no matter what, even when I've sold a house or bought a house, sometimes I don't see everything because I've got that seller's mindset or that buyer's mindset. So having that extra opinion to me is a definite quality I could use.
Thank you. And then one more question. Many home buyers worry about molding issues when purchasing older homes. Can you talk a little bit about how we can tell what's severe and what's not?
Mold as in like MOLD? Make sure I heard you right?
Yes.
Okay. So the mold is caused by a cool, damp, dark place. So if you see a discoloration, it's an opportunity. If you see growth, it's definitely a bigger opportunity that you have mold. Again, I want to emphasize, I don't do mold inspections. When I see them, I refer them off. But the issue is you're getting water in. It can affect some people's health. It definitely is going to cause damage to the house. And that can be big money. And it could be hidden within the wall. One example from years ago, I had a small area about the size of a quarter that was damaged. And the water was coming from another part of the house inside the wall, draining to the area, and we didn't know where it was at that time. But when they opened the wall up, it was full of mold, and they had to tear out the whole front of the house. It was well over $100,000 in damage. And all I was able to do is find this one little spot. And once they exposed it, they found the mold behind it, and it was trapped by the hole that happened in the moisture barrier during construction. So sometimes mold will be there, and we can catch it and we can't other times. But when you do a mold inspection, you can do an air sample test. An air sample test will sample the air both inside and out and come back with numbers and allow you an opportunity to find out if there's something somewhere, even if it's not visible. So there's an advantage to those. Excuse me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Barry, for your wonderful presentation today and sharing your knowledge with the rest of us. We really appreciate you taking this time, and we appreciate everyone else for taking the time to listen in. 大鹏?
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, my dear Barry. OK, 以上就是我们这一次的讲座内容。然后呢，关于这一次的讲座的录播，我们会放到 YouTube 上给大家以观后看。然后呢，我们这里有问卷大家可以填写一下，然后我们会从中抽取3位朋友，然后送出我们的礼品卡。对，然后呢，我们之后还会去开展更多一些主题讲座，然后希望大家多支持，然后也请大家持续关注我们 SALA HOMES。 关注我们的公众号、小红书以及 YouTube 各个平台。然后现在在 PPT 上显示的就是我们不同平台的一些二维码，大家可以扫码关注一下我们其他平台。对，然后呢，最后还是非常感谢大家的参与，我们的讲座到此就结束了。对，好，我们下次再见。Thank you very much, my Barry. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Have a wonderful night.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Thank you.